Good evening, everybody. Tom Kowalski speaking from the Sausalito Yacht Club in Sausalito, California. I'm the Commodore for 2020. I'd like to welcome you to our virtual speaking event for the club. As we continue to be in a shelter in place in around the San Francisco Bay Area, we've dedicated a number of Wednesdays a month to have speakers coming in on a variety of topics. This evening, we have two return speakers, Mr. Dick Enerson, who will be introducing Mr. Ron Holland, and Mr. Holland did speak at the Yacht Club in the past. If any of you are unfamiliar with the Yacht Club, feel free to look at our webpage, sausalitoyachtclub.org, and or you can email me at commodore@sausalitoyachtclub.org. Mr. Holland's latest publication, All the Oceans, is commercially available and is also available at a bookstore in Sausalito called Sausalito Books by the Bay. Mr. Dick Enerson is a Sausalito Yacht Club member. His sailing resume is extensive, and in particular, he was an America's Cup crew member on Constellation, and he has sailed many boats in and around San Francisco Bay and the world, etc., and has also competed in the World 12-meter championships. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Dick Enerson, who will introduce Mr. Ron Holland.
Thank you, Commodore. I have Tom Kowalski to thank for my membership in this organization. I first met him when I came to the Sausalito Yacht Club, where I'd been zillions of times before, mostly for drinking, with Ron to help him with his presentation on the book that he's written, All the Oceans. And that led to a better relationship and a subsequent membership in the club, for which I'm very happy and proud. I've known Ron for something pretty close to 50 years, racing with and against all over the planet. And since he's been in Vancouver, BC for the last, I don't know, what is it, 7 or 8 years now?
Nine now, I think.
9, something like that. He's been a lot bigger part of my life as I go cruising up there every summer. And see Tom Hutton, who's aboard here, and many other fun people. But at any rate, this photo of young Holland was taken on my boat a couple of years ago as we went blasting across Vancouver Harbor to visit yet another friend. At any rate, Ron's biography is extensive, goes back to his birth in New Zealand, his arrival in California in the early 70s, his migration to Florida, thence to Ireland for a mere 30 years, and now apparently 9 years total in Vancouver, BC, where he continues to draw boats and sail boats and be a good mate to many of us. He was involved in the movie we're about to see, to the extent that he designed a couple of the principal competitors, the big boats, Lion and the other big one, which was Drum, the famous Drum, yes. At any rate, he's going to say a few words, show a couple of pictures, and then we'll see the movie, after which he will be available for comment and Q&A. Take it away, Ron.
Thank you, Dick. And one small correction on the biography. 1969, Fillmore West, Haight-Ashbury. I was there.
Right. I forgot to say that, and I should have said that you've had a long and warm relationship with the Bay Area. Many friends in Sausalito and other parts of the Bay, some of whom I hope will be checking into this show.
And certainly lucky for me that when I left New Zealand at 21 years of age, I arrived in San Francisco. And that connected me to Commodore Tompkins, Dick Enerson, Gary Mile, Tom Blackola. The list just goes on and on. And so I kind of kept going on this charmed life for another 60, 55 years. Okay, so this is primarily about Whitbread Round the World Race. The first few races were sponsored by the London brewer, Whitbread Corporation, and Volvo sponsored it for a while, and now there's a new structure for the next race that I'm not very familiar with. So when we were kids learning to sail, growing up in dinghies, we couldn't have imagined one day there would be a yacht race around the world. And I was fortunate to be socially connected, not sailing or as a designer, but socially connected with the first Whitbread race, because I was friendly with an English medical doctor dropout named Butch Dalrymple Smith, who signed on the Mexican yacht Sayula. So Butch and another racing friend of mine crewed for the Mexicans on a round the world race and won the first one. So I had a kind of connection to the round the world race. This tonight's feature is about 1985, 86, that period. Well, I guess it was like the fourth or fifth round the world race. And I had a couple of entries. Now, this is a difficult show for me to do because my designs didn't win this race. It's much easier when you say, Ron, come and talk about winning a yacht race. Well, now I'm telling you, my boats didn't win this race. But we, despite not winning, we were very high profile primarily because drum crashed and burned before the race started. And with Simon Le Bon, the rock and roll drum Duran Duran singer on. So we had a lot of unexpected and at times unwanted publicity. So the idea of designing a boat for the round the world race is heavily influenced, or should be heavily influenced, by weather routing. Because one of the wonderful things about yacht design is you can never do the perfect yacht design because the wind and the waves change every second. So you might think you've got the perfect yacht for this condition right now. In 5 minutes, it's going to be a different condition. So you don't have the optimum design solution all of a sudden. So a good racing yacht has to span a variety of wind and wave conditions to be successful. And of course, around the world race is the ultimate extreme of that. You know, you've got to start off in some harbor somewhere and then round Cape Horn, fast and safe. So that's a real design challenge. In this 1985-86 race, I had two boats entered, and they were both what you would call conventional maxi round the boys race boats, mostly influenced by the International Racing Rule handicap system. So in fact, in this period, we weren't particularly designing yachts. We were designing yachts to a handicap formula, which is like a intellectual attack on a handicap system. And the yacht part came later. So the two boats I had in this race, Lion New Zealand and Drum, were yachts that were very influenced by this IOR rule handicap system and by the fact that we were winning races against other maxi yachts with a particular type of design philosophy. Now, we did a lot of study about weather, and we knew that certainly the boats had to go fast downwind in big waves because they were going to experience quite a percentage of that. But what we found analysing the first 3 or 4 around the world races was a surprising variety of wind conditions and wind directions. Like there are times when these boats are on the wind in the Southern Ocean when you think they're going to be running. So that was an important part of the challenge of designing a yacht for this particular long race. Two very high-profile owners of my designs, Line New Zealand, under the command of Peter Blake, who went on to win the race in a later edition, and Simon Le Bon, the Duran Duran rock star, on drums. So we had very high profile people involved in these boats, which added to the pressures, if you like, from the design point of view. The race was won by a fairly small French yacht. And this is, when I say won, it's won by the handicap system. So when you look at yacht racing, you have to not just see the fastest yacht, you see the yacht that has tricked the handicap into thinking they're slow, but they actually are fast. So you're winning yacht races under this handicap formula, not just sheer boat speed. The story about this particular Whitbread race started off a little early, because normally the boats race in Cowes Week Fastnet race as a trial before the Whitbread race starts, and they head off around the world. Fastnet race is a good test, 650 mile across the Irish Sea and back, and normally can be rough. So it's actually a good starting point for anyone contemplating around the world race. Both Drum and Line were in this particular Fastnet race, 1985, before the start of the Whitbread race. And one of the highlights of my design career related to Drum doing this Fastnet race as a trial for the Around the World race. I'm staying with friends in the west of Ireland because it was my plan to go with a friend on a yacht out to Fastnet Rock and see the Fastnet race boats come around the rock as one of the turning marks. Very dramatic rock and lighthouse. So that was kind of a highlight for me. So the boats start out of the English Channel, around Land's End and across the Irish Sea to Fastnet Rock. The evening, I'm in West Cork getting ready to go out in the morning to see the yachts around the lighthouse. I get a call. You won't be seeing Drum going around the lighthouse. They've capsized in the English Channel. What? Well, this is not the first backseat boat I've done. And basically, they can't capsize. Oh, well, they can if the keel breaks off. So I'm told the morning that I'm due to go and watch the boats go around the lighthouse mark. Sorry, Ron, Drum's upside down in the English Channel. You won't be seeing them. Oh, God. You can imagine what's going through my mind. What the hell? So a friend of mine, sailing friend of mine with a little plane, agrees to fly me straight over the Irish Sea to the English Channel, and we fly down the Rumline track from Cowes, where the race starts, to Land's End, the turning mark, before you get to the Irish Sea. And we fly down the Rumline, and there's Drum Imagine a bloody 80-foot yacht upside down, no keel, rudder sticking up, and all the crew holding around the rudder. Well, this is pretty dramatic for the designer to see. How the hell? Well, because what it meant to me was, if this keel fell off, what about all the other boats that are out around the world? Are they at risk? But then I go, okay, all those other boats like Kilo or Condor had no problem. And it's basically the same engineering keel solution. So something must be wrong with drum that is different than all the other boats are designed. So all the crew, half the crew are below, which must have been very scary. Well, now I'm going to switch ahead 25 years. 3 years ago, Duran Duran were giving a concert in California and British Columbia. So Simon rings me up and says, we're going to have the band in Vancouver. Any chance we can go sailing one day? We've got a day off in Vancouver. So they do Vancouver, then they do Hollywood Rose Bowl. So I arrange for Simon and the band to come sailing out off Vancouver English Bay. But what was fascinating for me was Simon telling the band his story about being inside drum when it capsized for the first time. Now, these guys had never heard this story before. And I found it really fascinating watching Simon relive this experience of being inside this 80-foot yacht. The thing goes turtle, upside down. Now, is this okay to waffle on about this particular aspect
Absolutely.
of my career? So the boat, the keel breaks off for some undetermined reason at that time. That now I can tell you, I know exactly. Half the crew are below. One of them is actually on the toilet. That was a bit of a trip, you can imagine. So the boat slowly rolls over and inverts, and balances upside down. What the guys below, including Simon Le Bon, presumed is their life was in grave danger. They didn't realize that without the keel, this boat can't sink. It's a sandwich foam construction hull. So there's no, with the keel off and all 30 tons off, it can't sink. So, but they don't know that. All they know is it gone. Great, look at the picture. So all they know is the thing's upside down and it's dark below. Scared the hell out of them, I can imagine. At the time the keel broke, my brother Philip was driving. And one of the lucky things about growing up in New Zealand, we all grew up sailing these little 7-foot dinghies. It's kind of like up to a sabo, but it's fully enclosed, so they can't sink. They don't fill with water like a Optimus does. And one of our training experiences growing up with these boats is you have to do a race and capsize it on every leg. So you get pretty good at tipping your little 7-foot dinghy over, grab the centerboard and lean on it, and it comes back up again. So it's a fun part of the drum story is my brother, who's went through this New Zealand Kiwi yachting experience, is driving drum. Bang, bang, and the boat goes slowly, went slowly over apparently. So my brother just does what he did on his 7-foot dinghy as a kid, walked over the side and grabbed hold of the upside down rudder. The only dry pack of cigarettes on the boat. So the other guys, most of them, Philip's alone on the bottom of the boat. Fortunately, the main sheet wrapped itself around the hull. So there was a line over the bottom of the rudder, head of the rudder. So he used that line to help people in the water, as half the crew are in the water, holding on to the upside down lifeline, the middle lifeline. And the one by one, he's pulling half the crew from the water up onto the bottom, like that photo nicely showed. There's still 6 or 8 guys down below, and they're really screaming their heads off because they think they're going down. Philip goes to the toilet through hull and yells down, guys, with the keel gone, this boat is not going to sink. You know, just stop panicking. We're floating forever. Well, that helped. So now all the crew are on the bottom of the boat that were in the water, and half the crew are underneath in this dark environment with the water up. If they stand on the deck, like you imagine upside down, you're standing on the deck, they're chest deep in water. So it's pretty scary. The sails, of course, have come all out of the bunks and all over the place. A couple of guys were trapped under the sails and could have drowned. And that was the biggest risk, actually, of this whole event, getting caught below under the sailbags. So now another really cool part of this story is there was a lifeboat reserve crewman standing on the beach in England watching drum sail past the beach about 3 miles off. And he tells a great story about he's got his dog walking down the beach and he sees his drum, obviously here comes drum, leading the race around Land's End on the way to Farstead Rock. He looks down to throw a bone to his dog or something. He looks up again. Where the hell's the boat gone? Like it's really fun to hear his story. It's like an apparition. You know, the boat, there it is, sailing along, racing in the Farstead race. He looks down, plays with his dog, looks back up. Where the hell's the boat? Oh, all of a sudden, oh, now I see the bottom upside down, visible. So he calls on his cell phone to his mates in the lifeboat station, which is 15 miles further down the coast. So instantly, drum capsized, the message has gone to the lifeboats. The lifeboats ring the British Naval base nearby Falmouth in the west of England. So there's a helicopter in the air under 5 minutes from the time the boat capsized. Well, that was pretty amazing. The helicopter comes out and 2 Navy guys, SEAL type guys, jump in the water with full scuba gear. By this time, everyone's on the bottom of the boat except the guys inside. Now that I've heard the Navy guy tell the story, so he jumps out of the helicopter into the water and dives under the boat, which is tricky because the lifelines and all the ropes and winches and deck gear, you have to kind of get, how the hell do you get in there? So he emerges inside the upturned boat with these 6 or 8 guys all kind of looking at him, bubbles coming up. And his reaction was, guys, you've got to get out of here instantly because the batteries had all tipped over. So the air was totally contaminated inside the boat. It probably didn't help that there was some guy taking a crap at the same time the boat turned over. But the main problem was the battery acid had contaminated the air. Of course, the guys below had kind of acclimatized to it. So they weren't aware of this particularly. But the Navy guy said, hey, you guys have got to come with me. You got to get out of here. He said, now I'm not going to particularly lead you, but I can guide you what I think is the best way to do it. You've got to hold your breath for 15 seconds. That's all. And I'll make sure you clear the lifeline as you go out beyond the beam of the boat. Simon's the first guy to say, okay, I'll have a go. And tricky enough, bloody ropes everywhere. And, I can imagine what about you could get hooked up in the coffee grinder handles, for instance. So anyway, eventually they all come out with the help of this Navy guy, and they all get on the bottom. Can we look at the photo again of the boat upside down? Because that would be nice to see again now. No, he's doing his stock market thing. Good job. Because, yeah, look at the photo of the drum upside down. Now all the guys are on the bottom. The big image is a painting that a New Zealand friend of mine did of Lion, New Zealand, which I'll come back to if I've got time. So this is a story about drum capsizing, getting towed into England. I land in England and, of course, go immediately, go and have a look at because there's a top plate of the keel is still bolted to the bottom of the boat. What had failed was the welding that attaches the structure of the keel to the top plate of the keel was very porous, so it must have been welded in the rain. It was hopeless weld. I'm amazed they actually got that far down the race course because it was really structurally terrible. So now the dilemma for this Whitbread race is they've got a month or less before the start of the race. Are they going to pull out or are they going to try and build a new keel? Well, pretty courageous. They said, let's keep going. So a couple of days later, the boat's in a shipyard and a new keel's being made and they make the race. That was intense. From my perspective, the responsibility, making sure this new keel was never going to come off. So Drum starts the race 4 or 5 weeks later, and they head off across the ocean. Now, all the crew are pretty spooked, as I can imagine I would be too. Is this new keel any better than the old keel? I mean, I had some counselling sessions with them before they headed off, you can imagine. I just go, well, look, hey, Keeler and Condor are still out there. And this keel's stronger than those Keeler and Condor keels. That's all I can tell you. So they start the race. Now we're at the race. So Lion and Drum, my two boats, are not the fastest boats. The fastest boats, actually, Dick, now I'm thinking it was the Catches because, no, Steinlager was the next year. So the Catches won the Whitbread race the following 2 years later. My boats were too round the buoys influenced rather than Southern Ocean influenced. So the little French boat that won was more of a kind of Santa Cruz 70 type boat. And you're just better suited for the conditions of that particular race. So Lion and Drum race around the world neck and neck, and I think they finished a few hours separated after all that distance. And they were in like 6th or 7th or something. Not very good if you're relying on your living as a racing yacht designer. You're only as good as your last hit, so they say in the music business. So that was this particular. I guess we're going to see the movie of this race. So that's some background about this race where my two maxi boats were involved. God knows what they say. Well, they're going to say they're not fast enough. Can we see the movie?
You bet. Let me go ahead and tee that up for us.
Stephanie, you've been unmuted. Would you like to ask Ron your question?
Looking at that video and understanding what's been going on since, what did that race teach you that changed your ideas or brought you forward in the design field?
Yes, sir, and I see the question about yacht design getting better or worse. So the trick with yacht design is knowing, as I mentioned earlier, the weather that you're going to be encountering. Because you want to design the proportion of the boat to suit the best possible, or the majority of the weather you're going to get. And then because you're not in the optimum weather very often, you sail like hell to make up for the boat not being optimum all the time. So then sailing skill becomes a bigger part than yacht design. And I think that you could say when Paul Coward for the Bay Area won his first round the world race, it was a testament to bringing Olympic sailing skill to ocean racing. Now, I'm not saying that, Skip Novak and Peter Blake aren't good sailors, but there's another level of intensity now that was kicked off by Paul Coward winning, where you sail the boat like it's an hour-long day race for a year. That takes some doing.
Amen.
Okay, let's go to Sandra. You have a question? You are unmuted.
Hi there. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. I just wanted to ask you, what was the cause of the failure of the keel on the boat you were discussing at the beginning?
Yeah, a good question. And so I've only been twice to court in my 55-year design career. And this was one time because the insurer of Drum, they sued everyone. The designer, the builder, the keel maker, the crew, everyone got sued. So we all had to go to the High Court in the City of London and defend ourselves. So we had to know why that thing broke. Well, you didn't have to be a genius. As soon as I saw the boat close up, you could see that the welding was crap, really bad welding. Now, normally, I would be involved in seeing that when it was being built. But the way the Drum story evolved was a bit more complicated because Drum was commissioned by a different owner and taken over by the Duran guys, who had a project manager that said, Ron, I'll take care of looking at the welding. Well, didn't work. But I had to go and defend myself anyway, which I did. So it was just bad welding. It was like it was welded in the rain, and you can't weld in the rain.
Interesting. All right, we're going to go to Nancy. You've been unmuted.
Commodore.
Hi, Nancy.
My host.
We
Can you
rec-
hear me, Ron? It's Commodore.
We recognize that, well, I can see Nancy, but I hear Commodore.
Oh, right. That's the way it is.
That's the way it is, yeah.
Oh, wait, we can, hang on, we can get the
I
picture.
don't want to hear Commodore
Here-
first. I want to hear Nancy
Here you
first.
are. There he is.
Ron, I had some signal from you the other day indicating that you were doing, quote, your last design, unquote. Well, I'll believe that when I see it. My question is, are you still doing that big schooner? Ah, there she is. Okay. Okay. When is that thing going to be built and where?
Well, we don't know yet. We're talking to 4 builders, 3 in Europe and 1 in New Zealand. And we'll make a decision in September.
Mhm.
So we're just working on the design now.
Is she a composite boat?
Well, we're getting quotes for alloy and composite, but I think it should be composite because if you're similar price range, your maintenance level over 10 years is way lower on a composite boat than a metal boat.
That sounds right to me. Thank you.
Any other questions from the group? Just put them in chat and we'll get to them. Tom, do you have anything that you want to ask Ron while we have him here?
Yes, I'm sorry. For some reason, I can't get through on chat. Ron, 2 quick questions. Regarding the crew for these 4 legs, what do they eat? What's their diets like? And number 2, what about their attire? I mean, you know, it's cold, it's wet, they're soaked in, you know, salt water. Any comments on that, sir?
Well, as the game gets more competitive, those physical influences become more challenging. And if you like, when I refer to Paul Kayard's win, it was like if you're an Olympic star sailor and you say, we're going to sail this boat like it's a star around the world, that is a whole different world than what we saw in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look, you know, you can see there was some tough sailing going on. But when you up it to the Olympic level, it's way different. And then I'll make a comment now on the last couple of races where the boats, I don't know if you've seen how much water's over the deck of those boats, but it's ridiculous. They're like submarines. So you are totally wet all the time. So, yeah, that's a huge influence on sailing efficiently over day and night. How do you put up with keeping dry and warm? Well, you don't. You just give up being dry and warm, I suppose. Now, food has become a bigger deal. There's a more scientific approach to diet with these crews now than it used to be. When sail around the world, they had a bottle of wine and steaks most nights. That's gone. Now it's freeze-dried powder with a little drop of water stuck in.
Good question. Good question. We're going to go now to John Connolly. I've unmuted you, sir.
Oh, hi, Ron. I would like to get your thoughts on the trends in modern yacht design. I go to boat shows frequently, and I see lots of boats, huge sterns. Everything seems exaggerated. I'm not sure if those design trends are sensible, and I would like your thoughts on that.
How long you got? I mean, it's a question. No, hang on. I'm going to answer it by saying this is my. Can you see it?
Yes?
Oh, not very well. Sorry, but it's a fairly classic kind of a thing. So I think that the trend towards straight line yacht design, like vertical bow, vertical stern, flat sheer. Well, hey, that's what I was doing when I was 4. They're the boats I was drawing when I was a little kid. Now, I understand from the race boat perspective, we've always been designing to a handicap formula. So it's never been pure yacht design. It's been tricking an intellectual approach to a handicap system. Now, the handicap system now is a bit more open, but what we're seeing is really simplistic, straight line design, like I was doing when I was 5. I don't know. I mean, whatever. Hey, if you're a yacht designer and you want to make a living, you got to win races if you're in that race game. So aesthetics doesn't matter. You got to design the best solution to get across the finish line first. We don't care what the boat looks like.
Are modern yachts safer or less safe than the more classic designs?
I think the safety issue has been kind of taken away from the designer and the builder because there's more rules in place. Like when in the 70s and 80s, there was really no rules about how to build a boat safe enough. I mean, you didn't build it safe enough, it didn't win because it wouldn't finish. Now we've got quite strict rules about the scantlings, the thickness of the hull and materials. Even the rigs are being looked at by third-party consultants. So I think safety isn't an issue. As long as you keep the boat afloat, hey, you're not going to drown unless you're really unlucky. The watershed of this question, I think, was the 1979 Fastnet race, where 15 or 16 people drowned and several boats sunk. And after that race, there was a lot of discussion and analysis about how can we make these boats safer. And that did have an effect. The boats had more stability and were scrutinized more before going on these long races. So, but I have to also say that if you were in a 30-foot boat built bulletproof in the 79 Fastnet race, there was still a good chance you're going to get flipped over because the sea conditions were so extreme. So you can't legislate 100% safety in this game. You take sensible approach and you get help if you're a designer that needs help, like I was happy to do, and you do the best you can. But hey, Cape Horn's Cape Horn, man. Commodore was there and was 3.
No, I was actually, I understand your background is mostly racing yachts, but ordinary people like myself can't afford high-end boats. The best we can do are the production boats. And so I often wonder about the design trends in production boats and whether they're really up to any kind of rigorous sailing in offshore waters or not.
But I hope and I believe that the production boat designers and builders don't want to be in court. They're conscious of the fact that if the boat breaks up and sinks, they're going to have to go to court and defend themselves. So no one is taking it for granted that we need to be careful. I think the industry has a pretty good record of the boats being quite successful. Okay, there's 1 or 2 instances that can be analysed and learned from. But generally, the production boats that are being built today are pretty safe, I would say.
Okay,
Awesome, thank you. Couple
sounds
more
good.
questions. From T. Dietz, you've been unmuted.
I have? No, am I muted or unmuted? I
Yeah,
don't blame you if you mute me.
You're fine, Ron. Our next question. And I don't know why.
Let me tell you a story about questions.
All right.
I've done this enough to I've been standing in an arena, not one question. The other extreme was when I first talked at the Royal Vancouver Yacht Club. 2 hours of questions. So in the end, I just went, I'm quitting and I'm going to the bar. But I mean, like 2 hours, it's hard. You give it an hour presentation, then you've got to answer questions for 2 hours. Hey, you've got to admit they're an enthusiastic bunch.
All right, I could not unmute T. Dietz, so I unmuted Michael Endicott. You want to ask your question?
Oh, yeah. So talking about boat design, and the Whitbread, as you said, is sort of the same race for kids, though, as the tall ships were doing for business reasons. But what do you think about a race which drives boat design to be more of an aircraft and that can't be sailed in winds over 20 to 25 knots? I'm talking about the Whitbread versus the America's Cup, of course.
Are you saying, are you suggesting that might be a rule?
No, I guess I'm asking is the America's Cup really a boat race?
No.
From a boat designer's point of view, that's what I was asking. We kind of left the realm of sailing.
It doesn't look like a boat to me. I love aeroplane design too, so I'll have a go at it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's try one more time.
Well, I'd like to, knowing that if Commodore is still in the audience, Nancy, so my friendship with Dick is, it evolved from the first coming, as I mentioned at the beginning of this show, 1969 to San Francisco. So I've been so lucky to have friends in the Bay Area my whole life that have been a hugely positive influence on having fun in life as well as making a successful yacht design career. It was a big influence.
All right, Tom, I think I'll leave it to you to close it out with Ron.
Well, Tom Kowalski speaking here. First of all, I'd like to give a round of applause to Russell, our communications director. We all know sometimes when we go out sailing, things break. A halyard breaks, a winch doesn't work, whatever. And Russell, you really hung in there and you fixed it. And that's great in terms of the audio for the Whitbread, et cetera. It's not easy. And to be honest with you, I could have never done such. But so a round of applause to you, sir. You did a great job for us. And thank you very, very much.
For everyone who's interested, Zoom does not work by pushing audio from a video if you have an external speaker and an external mic. I had to jerk them out.
Well, it's a learning curve for all of us. And again, this virtual world is complicated. But again, thank you, sir. Well done. Bravo. You did a great job for us. And Ron, we had you visit Sausalito Yacht Club a number of years ago. Sir, the door's open. Red carpet.
I'll be back. You'll be sick of seeing me.
Well, your wise, sage comments are appreciated, and I will follow up with something which will be a little bit of a surprise for you in a couple of weeks, okay?
Okay, I'm on standby.
All right, sir. Well, everybody, wishing you well from Sausalito. Thank you for attending, and we will have more of these in the future. Again, we're in shelter in place, but we appreciate your attending, and I can say Godspeed, stay well, and stay healthy. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.